This video is sponsored by Doom Guardians, an American manufacturer of tabletop RPG miniatures that are now planning to release a complete adventure module for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. It's called The Curse of the Usurper. The Kickstarter is planned to go live on September 13th, link in the description below. And to promote it, they asked me if I want to take a closer look at the introduction chapter of that module, which you can download for free on their website. And you know what? I was in the mood of running a one-shot anyway, so I agreed to it. I grabbed a couple of my friends, sat down for 4 hours, and we had a pretty good time, all things considered. And I think it would be pretty interesting to give you an overview of what this module is all about, and if it is worth your time. So, before we talk about my playtest experience, I suppose I should set the scene and explain the backstory. The Curse of the Usurper is a tale about ancient dwarven mines, and as you know, if there's one thing dwarves like to do, then it is to dig too deep. They uncovered a magical stone, Nehidium, and thanks to it, the dwarves prospered. But it influenced the dwarves living in the mines, which are run by the Shellborn clan. One day a child was born to the king, but he wasn't a dwarf, rather the manifestation of the ancient stone itself. The child brought the downfall of the Shellborn clan and became known as the Usurper. He started to possess other dwarves and had a revolt against his father. In the end, the king decided that he has to steal the mines. But to contain the Usurper, he made a deal with the forces that dwelt within the Nehidium stone. In exchange for sealing the gate to the mines and imprisoning the Usurper, his line was cursed. The lifespan of every member of the Shellborn clan was halved, and their souls would go back to the mines to wander them for all eternity after their death. And there are only 2 ways to break this curse. Either someone has to destroy the Usurper, or anyone who bears the curse must die. But in that case, the Usurper and his undead horde will be freed from the mines and wreak havoc. Oh, also they can pass the curse to other people as well, by the way. The story of the module proper begins with Rawmere Shellborn, the last living member of the Shellborn clan, who is in possession of one of the 3 keys required to open the gates to the mines. As he is about to succumb to the curse, he is seeking the help of a mage to break it, and if that doesn't work, he plans to pass the curse to someone else, knowing well that he might damn someone innocent for all eternity. On his way to the great city of Hafdir, he met a couple of adventurers, which he hired to escort him, and potentially to curse him if necessary, as he can't risk that the Usurper is freed from his prison. And that's where the party gets involved. Now this was the abridged version of the story. If you want the full story, well, here's the neat part. One thing that Doom Guardian is doing to set this module apart from others is offering voiceovers. They hired some actors to read out flavor text, some character dialogue, and an almost 10 minutes long introduction explaining the backstory. In the PDF you find QR codes next to each flavor text that link you directly to the audio file, and they plan to do that for the entire module. This is pretty great for immersion, and they are all very well acted. And well, you might have noticed, but I'm not a native English speaker myself. I do sometimes stumble over my lines, mispronouncing things and so on. And if you think me talking in my videos is bad, you should hear the takes I cut out. It's a very nice feature for sure, but it's not without its flaws. For one, it is something you have to get used to. I end up forgetting playing the audio files a couple of times, and sometimes depending on player actions, the pre-recorded lines weren't always appropriate. Which isn't really much of an issue, but yeah, you might end up not using all of them. And of course, you still have to do some additional narration as a DM anyway. It's very ambitious for sure, and I think it works pretty great. Also helps you to figure out how to pronounce some stuff. Stop putting J's where they don't belong, god damn it. So this playtest material consists of the Tavern's Bane Freighter encounter. Your players get to explore a ship with 3 decks, and you find the associated maps in the PDF. It's a rather large ship, and there's quite a few things to do. The entire thing is more or less designed to serve as a tutorial section, as the individual side quests are designed to teach some game mechanics. This stuff is technically optional though. Oh, and I guess spoiler warning, well I think that spoiler for this section don't really matter that much, and I want to paint a picture of the module for you. The module starts on the main deck of the Tavern's Bane. A ship that is a floating tavern, and your players have have been on the ship for several weeks at that point, and from that point it's kinda up to the players to explore the ship at their own leisure until you decide it's time to start the final encounter of this adventure section. I think a minor issue is that there is no real incentive for your players to do anything really. There are a couple of NPCs, some sailors, the captain and the first mate. As the dungeon master, you're supposed to have the NPCs start a conversation with the players if your players don't do so by themselves, and I had some mixed results in that regard. The first mate, Scorbellus, worked rather well, as he had a side quest associated with him and he's right there on the main deck. He wants the party to help him to fish some rainbow snappers, a rare fish that is actually protected by law and therefore forbidden to fish. He offers you some coins in exchange and it works as the tutorial for skill checks and attack rolls. It works rather well for that, and if your players want to figure out if he is paying them enough, they can roll an intelligence check, which also allows them to figure them out that they would be engaging in an illegal activity. Depending on the background and so on, I would also encourage DMs to just tell a player to roll an intelligence check regardless. It's a very nice way to break the ice to get into the roleplay part of this role-playing game. Some characters probably don't mind engaging in some fish poaching for some extra coins, while others may take issue with that. They might even want to put the first mate to justice. It's not a major thing, but it helps everyone to get into character by taking a stance on the matter. If the characters decide to help the first mate in his pursuit, but roll really badly, they might also find themselves in a combat encounter against a swarm of flying squid. And looking at the stat block, it's a pretty tough enemy for a CR1 encounter. It didn't happen in my game, and it's rather unlikely to happen in general, given that you have to fail a strength contest against a rainbow snapper by 5 or more, and the snappers only have a strength score of 2. Besides that, well, the captain tells you a little bit about some of the other passengers, and that they have some issues. This is meant to encourage the players to go look for them, but since he doesn't directly give the players a direct task to look for them, it's of little concern to them. I ended up asking my players if they don't want to go check out what all the fuss is about. Again, this of course depends on the players and their characters. Some characters will hear that the cabin boy Danny is smuggling food into the cargo hold, or that the old lady Coraline lost her charter and decide that they want to help them and to investigate right away. I ended up with a party of characters that didn't really care about that sort of thing. When in doubt, you can of course have Danny or Coraline approach the party directly, but I think it would have been more effective to get the party to engage with the material if the captain were to just ask the characters to look into it. Danny and Coraline are the other two NPCs that have side quests associated with them. Danny is distressed as he smuggled a couple of mice on board that turned out to be baby giant rats, which are now fully grown. He has trouble keeping them under control and asks the players to capture them. This side quest is essentially designed to serve as a combat tutorial, as you have to fight the rats, and to seek non-lethal solutions at the same time, as Danny doesn't want the rats to be killed. You can try to pacify them with animal handling or knock them out in combat. My players ended up using the sleep spell, which also works. If the player succeeds at the task, then he lets them keep one of the rats, and if there's one thing every D&D party likes to do, then it is adopting some pets. However, perhaps the most intriguing side quest is the one you get from old lady Coraline. Like I mentioned earlier, she lost her charter, like a combination of a passport and a ticket, and the captain wants her to get a new one if she is unable to find her old one. Something she can't afford. She tells the party that she thinks the captain, or one of his men, stole it from her, so they can scam her out of extra money. Which is not the case. If the party can work out a solution, she offers him a potion of healing in return, which is a pretty good incitement to get the party involved once they actually bother to talk with her. This side quest tests the party's problem-solving skills. How do they approach this issue? Now the module offers 3 solutions. A. The party does the obvious and simple thing and just searches a room. On a DC 12 investigation check, they find the charter in a chamber. B. The party decides to just talk with the captain. On a DC 12 persuasion check, he lets it slide, or you can get him to forge documents for her with a DC 14 deception or intimidation check. C. Your party can try to forge the documents themselves. So essentially this quest is sort of designed to teach the party not to overthink things, as the obvious solution, searching the room to see if the old lady simply misplaced it or just talking to the captain, are the easiest way to resolve things. My party decided to ask around to find out where the charter might have ended up. After the third NPC told them that Caroline stayed in a room for most of the journey, they finally got the hint to just search a room. However, while it's not really stated in the quest description, it might also encourage the party to investigate the captain's quarter to find the missing charter, as Caroline suspected the captain took it. It's not there, but they might look there anyway, and I think that is sort of the idea. There isn't really a reason to visit the captain's quarters otherwise, as the captain is on the main deck and the door is locked. But they did devote a whole page to describe the quarters and hid a key there, which is intended for a side quest in a later part of the module, which isn't covered by this playtest material. I think this quest is actually rather cleverly designed. The solution is simple, but if you go out of your way to sneak into the captain's quarters, your efforts will be rewarded. Besides that, the party can and probably should speak to Romeo. In fact, the DM should probably encourage the party to see him, as he is the reason why they are in the first place. He doesn't have any side quest for them, but this is a good opportunity to give some hints to what is going on behind the scenes. And since the chamber is close to the one Lady Caroline lives in, it's also a good opportunity to have her approach the party after they talked with Romeo, if the party doesn't do so by themselves. The final part of this chapter is a confrontation with a Nehidium spawned abomination, a construct that wants to kill Romeo. This creature shows up whenever the DM thinks it's appropriate, so if you or your party doesn't bother with any of the side quests, you can just have it show up right away if necessary, but then there isn't much to this chapter now, is there? Anyway, the party should be on the main deck when this encounter starts. The Nehidium spawned abomination jumps out of the water and tries to climb on deck. As long as you have at least one player character with a passive perception of 9 or higher, which should be every group really, unless your entire party for some reason has a negative wisdom score, your party notices this construct approaching and they should be able to attack it before it climbs on deck and use the railing for cover. Again, this section doubles as a tutorial as it explicitly states that you can use it for cover. Which is pretty nice because in my experience, cover mechanics are something many D&D players aren't exactly familiar with. If Romeo is on deck, the abomination will focus on killing him. Besides that, it mostly attacks in retaliation, or maybe some sailors to slow the ship down. This thing is pretty tough for a Tier 1 creature. With 85 HP, it is rather tanky and it hits for either 2d8 plus 1 with its tentacles, or 2d8 minus 1 with its ranged throw stone attack. Since your party is supposed to be level 1 for the section, this thing can overwhelm your party rather easily. 2d8 are enough to potentially knock someone out in one hit, maybe even kill someone instantly. And it can attack twice with its throw stone attack, while its tentacle grabs the target. However, its attack mods are rather low. It has +3 to hit with its tentacle attack and +1 to hit with its throw stone attack. And when I ran the encounter, I rolled really bad for this thing. It hardly hit anything, but again, this is a matter of luck. This encounter could potentially be rather deadly. Romeo isn't on the deck right away. The DM is supposed to decide when Romeo arrives on the deck, and when he does, the abomination is supposed to solely focus on him. Now here's where I notice a small oversight in the playtest material. This encounter is more or less scripted, and there's some stuff supposed to happen during the fight. First of all, that Romeo joins the fight. Next, when Romeo's hit points are reduced to 5 or lower, an event is supposed to trigger. The irritating part of that is that Romeo only has 2 hit points to begin with. His usual hit point maximum is supposed to be 5, but because of the curses, has been reduced to 2. So yeah, saying something is supposed to happen when his HP are reduced to 5 or lower doesn't make much sense, as they already are lower than 5 to begin with. But again, this is playtest material, so we shouldn't judge it on such a minor oversight. Anyway, just change it to when the abomination hits Romeo with an attack and you're golden. When that happens, Romeo dies and he passes the curse and the Earth Key of Shackle to the party. One of the 3 keys to open the gates to the minds of the Shellborn clan. However, like I mentioned earlier, this encounter could end up badly for the party, and the module does account for that as well. If all the characters are dying or knocked out, you are supposed to assume that the abomination succeeds in sinking the ship, and that all the characters end up washed ashore at the coast. If Romeo hasn't died at that point yet, you're supposed to have him pass the curse to them there, and then let him die. Curious enough, something this module doesn't really account for is the possibility that your party manages to slay the abomination with Romeo surviving. Now, since he has a rather low AC and only 2 hit points, like I mentioned earlier, this is rather unlikely, but not impossible. And the module is obviously written under the assumption that Romeo dies here. and the party gets cursed. Now I can think of two ways to work around that scenario. A. You are the dungeon master. You can ignore dice rolls and just say that the abomination is using its action to kill Romia without rolling a die, or you can simply fudge it. I kinda lean towards this since the abomination succeeding in killing Romia is simply more dramatic. B. If Romia against all odds survives the encounter and the party manages to kill the abomination, just have him succumb to the curse and pass the curse to the party on his dying bed. Anyway, after this encounter the party gets to level up, and this is where the playtest material comes to an end, leaving us on a cliffhanger until the complete module comes out. Oh, there's also one minor thing I would like to address. The Earth Key gives the character attuned to it the ability to cast Magic Stone at will, which is a neat little feature for sure and on brand, but there's a minor problem with that. Magic Stone is a cantrip from Xanatar's Guide to Everything. This spell isn't described in the PDF, and I think they wouldn't be allowed to do so because it's not part of the SRD, the stuff that is covered by the open game license. Essentially, if you want to publish your own D&D adventure, you can freely access everything covered by the SRD, but everything else is kinda off limit. I'm not sure if it's a problem to assign a stat block a spell that isn't in the SRD, if you don't include the spell in the book itself, but it is rather inconvenient for dungeon masters and the players who want to play your adventure. Now, it didn't really come up when I was running it, and having access to Magic Stone is certainly not essential, but putting a spell in your adventure that not everyone has access to without buying an additional source book is a bit of a hassle. So, what do I think about this adventure? Well, I think this module comes with a pretty strong plot hook. The history of the Shackleborn is rather intriguing, and the curse seems like a pretty decent way to get the party involved. The playtest material is rather well designed for the most part, with the only thing I would maybe change is to give the party a better incentive to engage with the optional content. Another thing which I think would be a good idea is to add like a bar area to the ship. This is supposed to be a floating tavern, but you wouldn't know it from just looking at the map and the area description. A bar area would also make it a bit more convenient to have the player meet the other passengers, but overall these are some minor nitpicks. My players had a good time in our one-shot, and I think it's certainly worth checking out, and I am inclined to give the full module a try once it is released. But what about you? Are you interested in checking out this module? Would you like me to review more D&D adventures? Let me know in the comments below. I am Tricky Fox. Stay foxy.
Sly as a fox, you got me under your spell. But you know I'll never tell that I know you know so well.